tuned in to the Community Cats podcast. Ready? Let's go.
Welcome to the Community Cats podcast. I am your host, Stacy LeBaron. I've been involved helping homeless cats for over 20 years with the Merrimack River Feline Rescue Society. The goal of this podcast is to expose you to amazing people who are improving the lives of cats. I hope these interviews will help you learn how you can turn your passion for cats into action. And today we're speaking with Stephanie Mathers. Stephanie has been involved in animal rescue and welfare since adopting her first cat, Shakespeare, in 2002 from the Capital Area Humane Society in Lansing, Michigan. As her love for animals grew, she adopted more cats along with a few house bunnies and became involved in trap, neuter, and return, TNR, for a group of community cats in Williamston, Michigan. After moving to Utah in 2010 to be closer to the mountains, Stephanie started helping rescue animal rescues and sanctuaries in her spare time. Her roles varied from animal care volunteer to board member to grant writer. In the meantime, she fostered a successful career in education with roles ranging from high school English teacher, middle school principal, curriculum director, and policy writer. During this time, she wrote grants for her own school and for smaller nonprofits in the education space. In 2021, Stephanie started focusing more time and energy on her work writing grants for animal-related nonprofits and officially started Grants for Animals. After working successfully with a small group of nonprofit clients, she began to recognize the deep need among animal-related nonprofits for grant writing assistance. After expanding her client base to maximum capacity, she started creating online courses and resources so that her work could help more nonprofits and more animals. Today, Stephanie enjoys working with a small group of full-service clients as well as the students in her online courses and consulting clients. Since its inception, Grants for Animals has been involved in earning, managing, and reporting on over $2 million of grant money for nonprofits in the animal welfare space. Her goal is to blend the need, spreadsheet, budgets, grant proposals with the heart and unwavering devotion to alleviating the suffering of all animals in order to help as many nonprofits and animals as possible. Stephanie, I'd like to welcome you to the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So that first cat or somebody else, who made you so passionate about cats?
Well, it was that first cat, but I will say as a backstory, I was not allowed to have pets as a child. My parents were so anti-animal, even though I wrote, directed, and produced a play at the age of 12 called Can We Have a Dog?, which starred me as the parent, my sister as the responsible pet owner child, and my brother as the dog. And at the end, the call to action, so can we have a dog, was not well received. So I desperately, my whole life, wanted to have a companion animal. I just knew that it was going to be something that changed my world. And it was not until I was in college and out on my own and living in an apartment that I was able to actually go to the Humane Society in Michigan and adopt Shakespeare. And I was an English major, so I always knew my first cat was going to be named Shakespeare. He's a little orange and white ginger kitty. And it was just everything I thought it would be, having that bond with an animal. And even though I always thought my first pet would be a dog, I just, for whatever reason, like, cats called to me, and then there was no looking back. I've always been a kitty mama since then.
So in your bio here, you say you've had experience with trap, neuter, return. How did you learn about trap, neuter, return? And thinking as a grant writer, I hear so many people say, oh, no one will ever fund TNR. No one wants to fund spay neuter. Learning what you did about TNR and what you're doing now professionally, are they able to translate into funds?
So absolutely is the answer there. And to go back to this group of community cats, I was living in Michigan near a railroad track that was in kind of the outskirts of the main city. And there was a colony there that was just getting bigger and bigger. And I was living in the condo closest to the tracks and started seeing some cats. And so started building shelters for them and feeding them. And it got really out of control quickly. And I came home one day, there was this cat that I was calling Timmy. My ex-husband and I were like, oh, Timmy's really growing up. Like, Timmy's getting kind of big. And came home, and there on my doorstep, Timmy just had a litter. Timmy was a girl. And that's when I started realizing, obviously, these were feral cats. However, there was just no way that I could watch this because several of the kittens died. I mean, we were trying to support Timmy as much as we could with feeding the babies, but I mean, it was the middle of winter in Michigan and it was not a good situation. So that's when I started looking into this. This was 2002-ish, and there was not a lot out there about TNR at the time. There were not a lot of resources. So for example, I decided to get all the mamas fixed. I just found a friend that had a trap. I had to go to the vet and pay for it. Now there's different resources out there to support somebody going in and trying to TNR a community group of cats. But at the time, it was just completely learning as I went. And the main thing was to make these cats as comfortable as possible. Multiple moms had litters near our condo. And, some moms were more equipped than others. Like this one that we called Mama Kitty, she always did really well with her kitties, and she was the hardest to end up actually trapping and then bringing home. But over years, we made a lot of progress. We got all of the mamas fixed as far as we knew. And then we're just, caring for them on the level that you would care for a group of community cats. Now there is a lot more out there. So for anybody thinking, grants in terms of community cats, the good thing is companion animals are typically, there are more grants available for companion animals, whether they're feral or not. That's just the reality, as opposed to farmed animals or something like that. So there are more out there, but also you can look at multiple levels. So there are grants out there just for somebody who doesn't even have a nonprofit, medical grants that would help if any of the cats they are caring for are sick and need emergency care. There are grants out there that would help for that. And then there are more formal grants for nonprofits in the TNR space, in both spay, neutering, caring for bottle baby kittens, if that is something that, it depends on the situation of the actual community that you're caring for, or just to build capacity for organizations. I will say that in terms of cat and dog grants, TNR is one of the areas that we're still trying to catch up. We're still trying to make the case in a lot of ways of why this is so important and essential for the well-being of these animals and for the overall health of our communities, human and animal. But I would encourage anyone who's working in this space, whether you formally have a nonprofit or not, that yes, there absolutely is funding out there to help.
Excellent. That's great to know. And whether you're a larger organization or a smaller one, you should have strategy. I often say to some of the smaller groups, obviously, I try to encourage them to go to the Community Cats Grants program and start out with that, because we try to make it pretty easy for people to sort of practice on us. But then there are also grants like the Walmart Foundation or some other ones, Athletes for Animals. There's some other ones that are some smaller foundations that are really supportive at a $500 and $1,000 level. And wouldn't you recommend, if there is a small nonprofit, that they start with some of these smaller grants first before asking somebody for $10,000 or something like that?
Absolutely. When you're going after grants, you need to make the case that you can responsibly steward the grant money. And so you want to build a history of grants. Even $500 medical grant or $1,000 grant is going to help you show future funders, hey, we've received grants before. We were able to successfully implement them and report on them. And the other great thing to think about with what you're talking about is that often, if you can prove yourself with $1,000 with the foundation, they're going to be more likely to give you a larger grant in the future.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm going to bookmark a thought about tracking those grants afterwards. But let's first talk about grant writing, even before we get to the stage, which I call as prospecting, which is sort of finding those grants first and foremost. If I am a brand new nonprofit 501c3 organization, I have not been in operations for a full 12 months, do I still have the opportunity to get a grant?
That's a great question. So the answer is yes. However, there is a lot that goes into that answer. The first thing that I always talk to nonprofits about when I'm just working with them and getting to know them is this idea of becoming grant ready. And for some nonprofits, they can actually get a grant before they even have their 501c3. They might be fiscally sponsored by a larger organization, or have some sort of access to maybe a corporate grant that does not require that nonprofit status. But for other organizations, it can take 5 to 10 years for them to really get grant ready. And so how I try to explain it is you have to approach your nonprofit like a business. And when we talk about getting grant ready, like you said, it's not about researching the grants. These are all things that we have to get in place way, way before we ever research a grant. So things like having some sort of financial system. If you are an extremely small nonprofit, that may be a spreadsheet, and that's fine. If you're getting larger, it might be QuickBooks, but you need to start building that history of finances. There are a lot of grants that are going to require 12 to 24 months of finances, and that would include a filed 990, profit and loss and balance sheet. So there are some grants where in your first 2 years, you're not even going to be able to go after them. But at the same time, there are grants out there for really any niche. So there's animal grants for only volunteer-based organizations or for only foster-based organizations. There's grants for those in the first 2 years of operation. There's just all sorts of things out there. However, in order to do any of those applications, you're going to want to have quite a few things in order. Otherwise, when you start an application, you're going to be scrambling around for all sorts of different documents. So just to show out one small example, having a board member list. A board member list is something I see required in almost every grant. And something that's happening more and more often is they're asking for demographics like gender and race and things like that within your board member list. So it doesn't take long to create, maybe 30 minutes to make it on a nice Google Doc with your letterhead. But having that on hand, and then every time you have a grant, you can easily upload it. And that's just an example of one of the many documents that will really help an organization become grant ready.
And much of the work that I do, I end up spending a fair amount of time on, I guess it's called Candide now, it used to be GuideStar. Do you recommend that we as a 501c3 check out that GuideStar profile and try and make sure it's as up to date as possible?
Yes, there's multiple different nonprofit profiles that I would recommend. That is one of them. Another one is Great Nonprofits. And then there are a couple other ones that are not as essential, but I have seen multiple grants say, we want you to post your link to Candide because we want to see what seal of transparency you have. So, for example, I've seen grants that say you have to have at least a gold seal of transparency. Now, the platinum is very hard to get if you're a small nonprofit because of what they ask you to upload. But if you can get yourself to gold, a gold seal of transparency, there's not a lot of information you have to put in for that. That's very helpful. And there are funders who will look at those things. They're going to go in and check out your nonprofit, even if you simply send a letter of inquiry, and they may not tell you they're going to, but you want to have your overall presence online. You want it to really look like you are an up and running nonprofit. So I usually recommend, in addition to those profiles, have a website, have an email address that is specific to your nonprofit by the domain. So you don't necessarily want stephanieskitties@gmail.com. You want Stephanie at stephanieskittyrescue.com. You want to have an official looking email address. And you also want to have at least 2 good social media accounts that you're working on. You don't have to have every single one, but you want to make it so if a funder is trying to learn about your organization and they're poking around, they can find all those things: websites, some profiles, and some different social media.
So how do you find what foundations to write grant applications to?
That's a great question. In the animal world, we're looking at a couple different types of grants. So we're looking at corporate grants. So if you think about anywhere you go to buy supplies for your animals, they probably have some sort of grant. So that's everything from Petco, PetSmart, Oxbow, if you deal with bunnies, Tractor Supply, all of those companies have a grant-making arm. And sometimes it's going to take quite a bit of time to really foster that relationship. So for a lot of them, you're going to have to become a partner first. And that usually is a portal application. And it is a little bit of a back and forth process. Then once you're accepted as a partner, you can potentially apply for grants. And as an example, Petco, they have a grant cycle for people who do in-store adoptions, but they have a different grant cycle that would include potentially TNR that's right around February or March. So that's with our corporate funders. And then we're going to have our family foundations, which are usually pretty state specific. And that's where I'll mention databases in a minute. Really, databases are the best place to find those state opportunities. And then there are going to be larger nonprofits. So if you think about Maddie's Fund, Best Friends Animal Society, those are larger nonprofits that will give to smaller nonprofits. ASPCA right now has a really big grant for rural shelters that are being built. And then just as one kind of add-on that doesn't always fit into one of those three categories cleanly would be your local community foundation. Your local community foundation may or may not have an animal welfare focus, but I really recommend getting on their radar because even if they don't have an animal welfare grant you can apply for, they often have many people with donor advised funds. And those people could just show up and say, hey, I'm obsessed with cats and I would like to give $10,000. Is there a nonprofit around? And if that community foundation knows about you, then they can actually recommend your nonprofit. So those are all the different places we're going to look. Now, with the corporate foundations, you can do Google searches. However, if you're looking at family foundations, which if you find the right fit, they can be great. Those are ones where you're probably going to want to use some sort of database. There are free databases and there are paid databases. If you want to just try exploring on a free database, there's one called Grant Gopher, which I have no affiliation with. You can do 5 searches for free, but make the most of those searches because once they run out, it won't show you every entry. It'll show you, I think, the first 10 or so with your free searches. But just playing around on Grant Gopher will give you the sense of what it's like to use a database. And they're very affordable by month. Another one that I do like is Grant Station. They are also pretty affordable, and Foundation Directory is going to be quite expensive. However, if you are a newer nonprofit, you can get their professional version for free for just 1 year. And you just need to go to their website. Again, I'm not affiliated with them, but I have talked to some smaller nonprofits that were able to get access to that for a year for free.
Are you passionate about the well-being of feline leukemia-positive cats, or would you like to learn more about FELV? Then mark your calendars for a truly special occasion. The Community Cats podcast proudly presents our highly anticipated event, Online Feline Leukemia Day, presented in partnership with the Tompkins Foundation. Join us on July 13th from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time for an enriching experience where leading experts from veterinarians to shelter specialists converge to share cutting-edge insights on feline leukemia studies and advancements in care. Discover invaluable suggestions to initiate and uphold policies and programs aimed at finding loving homes for these special kitties through fostering and adoption. Don't miss out on an opportunity to make a difference. Join us for this virtual conference and be a part of the compassionate movement to care for our FELV-positive furry friends. Go to communitycatspodcast.com/FELV Day to save your virtual seat. Again, space is limited, so don't wait. Visit communitycatspodcast.com/FELV Day to register today.
Are you getting your message across to your entire community? Do they know what programs you offer and what they can do to help? Learn more about how to effectively market your organization or just sharpen your skills with a free self-paced marketing course, The Fundamentals of Marketing on Maddie's University. The course is designed to provide a basic understanding of marketing and provide you with templates and tools to elevate and improve your organization's brand, voice, and audience, and have fun while doing it. You'll receive a strategic marketing plan template to download free. Go to university.maddiesfund.org and search marketing to enroll now. Are you a proud cat parent looking for the perfect, affordable healthcare for your kitty? Well, look no further than the Community Cat Clinic, conveniently located in Woodstock, Georgia, just north of Atlanta and not too far from the Tennessee and South Carolina borders. The health and happiness of all cats are the top priorities at this feline-only hospital. From preventative care, spay, neuter, and vaccines to specialized and innovative treatments like full mouth dental, ultrasound, radio, iodine therapy, emergency blockage cases, they've got your cat's well-being covered. For the TNR community and local shelters, they offer easy-to-access, low-cost spay-neuter services and volume appointments. So if you want to do a large TNR project, this is the clinic you want to go to. It's worth the extra trip. Appointments are available most days. Check out the Community Cat Clinic online at communitycatclinic.com or visit them in person at the Walmart Shopping Center at the Shops of Trickham on Highway 92 at Trickham Road in Woodstock, Georgia. More per, less price. Are you a cat lover Want to make a real difference in your community? Join us at the TNR Certification Workshop brought to you by Community Cats Podcast and Neighborhood Cats. Learn the best practices of trap, neuter, return from experts in the field. Help improve the lives of community cats while gaining invaluable skills. Whether you're a seasoned pro or new to TNR, this workshop is for you. Get certified and become a catalyst for change. Ready to make a positive impact? Register now at www.communitycatspodcast.com/get-TNR certified. Transform lives one cat at a time. Join us and turn your passion for cats into action. Excellent. And I have quite a bit of experience using Instrumental, and it has a lot of cool tools, I guess I would say, in there. It is expensive, but what I think is great is actually folks can reach out to me at Stacy at communitycatspodcast.com, and we can do a filtered search and come up with at least a little short list for some of the smaller groups. And so we've done that at the United Spay Alliance, helping support our state leader program. Because as you said, trying to find those foundations that are specific to a state, you really need to be able to filter down and really be able to, get right in on the details of those organizations. Before we move into the actual details around putting an application together, I love prospecting for foundation money to support the passion for cats. I'm turning our passion for cats into action. That's our motto here, is right. We're going to do that. And so if I come up with, say, a list of 10 organizations that I think would be a good fit with us, do you recommend we call them up and introduce ourselves and say, is it a waste of our time to write, or is it done on a case-by-case basis? How do you recommend beginning that initial conversation, the LOI process, I guess?
Thank you for that question. And this is so important because just the nature of grants overall is no matter how good you are, you're going to hear no's, and you're going to have different foundations and organizations that are not perfect fits. So you have to have a thick skin, first of all, and you have to know that. But then also you want to make the most of your time, and you want to make sure that whatever foundations you're approaching would actually be a good fit. If you just start searching animal welfare grants, that is way too broad, especially if we're talking, say, specifically to TNR. So there are two things that I would say. The first thing I do before I get on the phone or get on an email is I pull a 990. So I am so nerdy about looking at foundations 990s. But if you look up their 990s, you can scroll down and you can see where they've given their grants and how much the grants are. So you can look at the geographic location where they're focused. Maybe they say animal welfare, but when you look at their 990, they only give to therapy horses. That's every single grant that's related to animal welfare went to horses. That's not going to be a good fit for community cats. So that's where I usually start, because you can do that in the middle of the night. You don't even have to pick up the phone, look at the 990. And then if it does look like it's going to be a good fit and you can find a phone number or email address, I absolutely recommend that. And this is something that just over time, if you try this, you will see the results and you will see it's completely worth it. So it can be, sometimes you can only find an email. Sometimes you can find a phone number. If the phone number is from the 990, many times it's just going to go into a mailbox that gets checked once a week or something like that. But when you have those initial emails or calls, you basically want to be asking the funder, hey, I would love to learn more about your priorities and what you are looking to fund and where you're passionate. And then you can figure out, are you a fit for them or not? And it could be that they're actually not a fit for you, but they know of a different funder who would be. And even if you can't get on a phone call, an email could be excellent, just a really good way to get yourself on their radar. And then if you do decide it's going to be worth your time to apply to that organization, somebody there already knows you. They know about you. They've been introduced to you. So that is always a really big advantage as well. So in short, go ahead.
I was just going to throw out a bit of a word of caution with regards to family foundations. I have gotten myself into a bit of a spot where often the family foundations are really led by one person, and you get to know that one trustee and you have a conversation with them and you really want them to support your organization. And they come up with an idea that they want to build purple feral cat houses or something like that. something that is close to mission, but not really on target. We don't want pink and purple feral cat houses advertising that we're feeding feral cats. But for some reason, they think it's a beautiful idea. They want us to build 100 of them. They're going to give us all the money. And it's really hard to say, I want to say yes. And I have said yes. And I have gotten into big trouble, like a $35,000 trouble accident, by letting them drive the bus. And so I want to just put that word of caution out there, which is still keep the integrity of the organization, make sure that the gift is going to make a difference in your organization versus just serving the needs of the trustee. I would assume you would agree with that. You're nodding.
Such an important point. And this is something that we find overall with grants is we are trying to increase bandwidth and increase funding. And if you just say yes to everything, or if you get a little bit out of mission, you may end up all of a sudden creating a $50,000 project that you didn't want to do to begin with. And so it is so important to try to be going after grants and foundations that are in alignment and will support the work you are already doing and help you expand on that before you start just creating brand new programs in order to satisfy funders. And this is something I see all different nonprofits at all levels and at all years of experience. They can easily run into that because it is so tempting when you're trying to get funding.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's talk about the actual writing of the grant. Do we have to hire a grant writer to do all this work? Is it something that is like having an accountant? Do we have to hire somebody out, or can we do this ourselves?
Well, even though people can hire me as a grant writer, I actually recommend to do it in-house. And there's so many reasons why. You absolutely can hire a grant writer and have that be successful. I would say the vast majority of the time over the long run, it's much better to have somebody in-house, and there's a couple reasons. That person in-house is going to be able to potentially provide boots on the ground implementation, reporting, and things like that. Now, when I write grants, I do all sorts of things. I help with the reporting. I help with implementation. I'll make tracking sheets. That's just me, though. A lot of grant writers, they will only write the proposal. So they will say, okay, you need to send me what grant you want to go after and everything, and I will just cook up the proposal for you and give it back to you, and then you submit it. I have to be honest that is really not that helpful. There is so much more that goes into grants in terms of preparing the documents you actually need for the application, writing the application, implementing it, reporting on it, communicating with the funder, and then maybe going after it again the next year. And so having somebody in-house that, first of all, knows how to talk about your organization and is obsessed about it, and is willing to just kind of put it all together in this grant package is a huge advantage. The hard thing is when you're dealing with an all-volunteer organization, or you have the executive director actually does every single job that you could possibly have for the nonprofit, there is a bandwidth issue. And it also can be very hard to deal with a volunteer grant writer because there just isn't always that buy-in when you're working with volunteers. People have limited time and resources. So I think the best thing I would recommend is if there is somebody really tied to the organization who's maybe a staff member or a board member that is willing to take it on, and give them a year, get a year commitment, because really you need 12 months to be looking for your grants, applying for them when they're open, and then seeing how successful you can be, and really empower that person and help support them. Because as a grant writer, you can kind of feel like you're on an island, and sometimes there's things you need that you don't have access to, like finances. And if the organization is not supporting you, you cannot possibly get the grant submitted. So if you're going to go down the road of empowering someone to help you with grants, make sure there are other people who are going to support that person.
I've done grant writing for many, many years, and I have learned a lot over that time. So where in the past, I would think 75% of the work was in the grant writing, I've changed that mentality 180%. I've changed it to prospecting's 5%, writing is 20%. 75% of it is the implementation, the tracking, and the reporting. and then the follow-up with the foundation. And then there's the reapply again. But I used to feel like I was so far along on that fundraising process, just getting that application out. But then I wouldn't have communicated when we received the grant fully what we've promised in the grant agreement to the staff that's implementing it. And say you lose a staff member, and then that information doesn't get passed on to the next staff member. And then you're like, oh, this final report or follow-up report is due in a week. And we have to, spay or neuter 500 cats from this town in the next week because we promised it in the grant. We haven't communicated. We're not tracking this. How did we lose all this? And so it's been an incredible learning process for me over the years. And so I think it's really important that I can see us doing like a master class on this topic because we both can talk a lot about this, but is really stressing how important it is to just get the systems set up correctly to even just do 5 grant applications. Start small. Don't think like you have to do 1 million. Just do 5, but get that grant readiness and the 5 grants and put those in place and see how that goes during that first year and then use that as a building block.
Yes. And I truly believe that grant writing is a skill that you build over time and you just get better and better at the research aspect of it and also at describing an organization. And especially there's certain parts of grant applications that really scare people, like the sustainability plan or the needs assessment. And any of those given things, the more you write those and the more you have on hand for your organization, the better you become at them. But I totally agree. Start small, something like 5 grants. That sounds like a great amount. And also just the nature of going through that first year, you're going to get many things in place. I just have one story, if I can share, of a nonprofit I was working with. We went after this very, very large grant for a mobile vet, a veterinarian to be on a mobile unit for an entire year. It was a huge grant. It was a $110,000 grant. And after they told us we were getting it, they said, okay, but before we give you this, we need 5 years of animal tracking. Well, this nonprofit had 3 different methods over those 5 years. They had a hand tracking, and then they had 2 different software systems, and none of them were talking to each other. They were all different systems, and we were in a scramble. Luckily, they had been tracking it for 5 years. Now, there was nothing in this application that said, if you get this, we're going to need 5 years of animal tracking. So this caught us totally out of the blue. Luckily, we were able to get all of that together at the last minute, and we were able to receive the grant and implement it. But this is just one example of just something that will come to you out of left field when you're dealing with grants. And it's another reason why it's so important to be grant ready. So even if you are trap, neutering, and returning, you need to be tracking all of those animals that you're dealing with, even if their outcome is they've been returned. So it is just extremely important to be getting those systems in places. And the nature of writing grants is as you go along, you will get more and more systems in place because you'll just have to.
Stephanie, it's been great getting to know you today. And I am not getting compensated in any way for this conversation today. There's no sponsorship here. I just think Grants for Animals is a wonderful organization. You're doing a great job. If folks are interested in finding out more about the services that you offer, how would they do that?
Thank you. Yeah, this has been a lot of fun. So I am Grants, the number 4, Animals everywhere. You can check out my website, grantsforanimals.com. There are a lot of free resources that I think would help many of your nonprofits. I do a monthly free newsletter that highlights at least 5 grants for animal rescues. And then I'm on all social media and I just share various tips and tricks regarding grant writing. And also I am here to help. I am obsessed with animals. That's why I'm doing this. So you can just email me, Stephanie at grantsforanimals.com. And I'd love to connect with any of your listeners in that way too.
Is there anything else you'd like to share?
The biggest thing I want to go back to is becoming grant ready and running your nonprofit like a business. If there's one tip that I would say to your listeners, it's start to get that into your mind. And that is going to help you not just with grant writing, but for anything you might do for your nonprofit. That's the biggest tip I can give.
Super. Excellent. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for agreeing to be a guest on my show. And I hope we'll have you on again in the future.
I'd love to do that. Thank you.
That's it for this week. Please head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a review. We love to hear what you think, and a 5-star review really helps others find the show. You can also join the conversation with listeners, cat caretakers, and me on Facebook and Instagram. And don't forget to hit follow or subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss a single show. Thanks for listening, and thank you for everything that you do to help create a safe and healthy world for cats.